All right, so just to pick up. So we just finished looking at phishing attacks. We established that phishing attacks are when they try to spoof some service or website in a bid to get your ever so precious credentials for the sole purpose of causing trouble. So that has to do with what they call social engineering, or people gravitate towards what they trust, right? So then we come on to Sheldon's favorite malicious attack. And for some reason, I just think this is something that Sheldon probably does in his spare time. Correct me if I'm wrong. And, well, you'd have to respond if I'm right. But the man in the middle attack, like I mentioned before, is when somebody sits down in the network. Somebody sits down on the network between 2 points, and that person can intercept, manipulate, and spoof any response or just observe the lines of communication. So I spent a good while sharing how that one worked and giving you a real life example um, based on that forum, and that happened here in Jamaica. So I don't put it past Sheldon at all or anybody else in this class. All right, not going to pick on Sheldon. All right, so I spent a good while talking about that one, so I won't have to spend much more time on this slide. But clearly, for a banker or for a bank or a financial institution, you can see we're doing something like this. Um, Something like this is in use. All right. Now um, another one that attackers tend to use is they try to look for every backdoor, every caveat, every loophole in your current security and try to find which user can perform what duties. So if they get a hold of some credential that has some clout, they'll they wreak as much havoc with that credential or those credentials as possible. So generally speaking, what you want to do is set up specific users, and this is a little sysadmin stuff now. So even if you're not a sysadmin, you can guide the sysadmin. So have a user directly responsible for handling the website requests. That's not the administrator. All right. You have another user that is directly responsible for, um, let's say, the database queries. Queries meaning, um, let's say, the bare minimum read and update, not create, maybe not even delete. Right. Well, depending on the nature of your site, clearly you may need to delete. But I'm just saying that you don't want to give administrator these rights, because if that attacker through his trying to penetrate into your website and tunnel into whatever ever gets access to these credentials, then they can access your server and start doing anything, start running applications, subscripts and so on to feed himself data based on your machine traffic and activities, whatever it is. So good practice is to define specific users to run specific services. If you're using AD, that's Active Directory, Microsoft Active Directory. I've never actually administrated users from Linux, but I have some AD experience. So anytime I was building an app or I needed something to do something specific, just go and spin up a user with the bare minimum credentials. Even with SharePoint. With SharePoint, they expect it to have 3 users. They want a SharePoint administrator user that through the SharePoint administrator, you would administrate the website's content, right? Yannick is not a Microsoft fan and spoken like a true hacker, Sheldon. Good, good. Oh, two of you aren't Microsoft people. Well, that's fine. Um, I mean, Microsoft has its pros and it has its cons, but hey. But for SharePoint though, for SP admin, it can manage the website content. It doesn't manage the database, it doesn't manage the services. Then you have another SP, I call them SP admin for the administrator, SP services and SP DB admin. All right, so SP services now, that one has the sole purpose, that user has the sole purpose of executing service like maintenance, time services, notifications, stuff like that. All of those run through that user. So SP admin can't execute those, and SP services can't deal with SP admin stuff. And just the same thing for SP DB admin. So the point I'm making is that you just want to minimalize as much as possible the amount of power that you give to any one user. And then, of course, the almighty administrator should be known to very, very few people. All right. Now, cross-site scripting. This one is rather fun. So with this one now, basically the user finds a way to have you execute some malicious code on your website and say, oh, so Yannick is okay. I sincerely apologize, Sheldon. All right, so Yannick, if you want to type up a paragraph of how you executed your last XSS attack, and then we can share it with the class, or at least type up your understanding of how it works. So I read an article some time ago about how this dude collected over 10,000 credit card. Sorry. About how some dude, some web developer, wrote some script to collect over 10,000 records of credit card information from a number of sites. Right? His technique was and this is, if you're a web developer, you'll fully appreciate it. So nowadays you have a lot of packages, so you call NuGet packages, or well, GitHub is where most of them are stored, and then through GitHub you have distribution points like NuGet for .NET, and oh, Sheldon read it. Yes, it was actually rather entertaining. All right, so you have NuGet, you have NPM, which is for Node, and they have Ruby Gems, or Gems for Ruby. You have a number of ones. Each framework has its own composer for PHP, etc. So he puts the code on GitHub as a library, a fun library that helps you debug your site. All right, a nice tool that people will use. So I see that tool and I can just, in my .NET project, because I'm a .NET guy, I'm coding a number of languages, but I love .NET. So let's just use .NET here. I know Yannick and Sheldon going to boom me off at the stage, but hey. So I go into NuGet, get that package, so I can help myself debug my code more easily. But what I unwittingly do is also download his malicious code. Right? So he actually has a useful tool, but somewhere in this useful tool with probably like 3 or 4 JavaScript code files that, I'm not going to sit down and read through the code to see what it does. Right? He has some malicious code that is just scraping data from my site and sending off to some server that he has provisioned, some database he has provisioned for that purpose. And then he got smart with it because nowadays people know about cross-site scripting. So a lot of security protocols, web servers have built-in diagnostics to say, hey, this code might be malicious. And I'm sure you've gone on websites and they, like your antivirus will warn you and say, hey, this site might be malicious. That's the stuff like that they look for. So in order to reduce the possibility of his code being detected, what he did, one, he left it out of the GitHub. So you have GitHub, which is the open source repo where all of it is, right? And then you have, all right, so Yannick is saying it's as simple as injecting JavaScript within a text field. If the user doesn't escape the inputs from the text field, it gets stored in the database, and on output, it executes the JS code. All right. So that's kind of like mixing a little SQL injection with JavaScript injection. All right, cool. Well, in this case, the developer would have actually put it on your site. So you put that thing on the site, he left out the code, the malicious code out of the GitHub repo. All right, so if you were to sit down and look through the GitHub repo code, you would not see the malicious code. However, he included it in the NuGet and the Composer and the whatever other distribution points. So if it was 2 kilobytes on GitHub, it was 2.5 gigabytes on the other ones because that one file that he left out was not included when you're actually putting it in your project, right? So anyway, it's in your project now, and then what he did, he let it execute at certain times to send off data. So it didn't continuously send off data on every event or every page load, but he would have decreased his activity during peak hours and increased it during off-peak hours. So I mean, I'm just showing you that this dude, like, thankfully it was fictitious. At least I don't think it was really. Oh, sorry about that. Right? He says it was fictitious. Sorry about that. But I mean, who am I to say yeah or nay, right? So he gave a good example as to how easy it is to include malicious JavaScript, and JavaScript is powerful and scary and beautiful and terrifying all at the same time. All right, so beware of JavaScript and beware of the tools and third-party tools that you include on your site. All right, it's just like the apps on your phone. I remember reading something and watching a feature that the flashlight app, yes, and their dependencies. The flashlight app is probably one of the biggest loopholes, security flaws you can ever put on your phone. Because a flashlight app that just turns on and on the flashlight in the background is actually watching all of your activity and sending off your data. All right, so it's the same principle. When you include a simple JavaScript, the JavaScript is doing so much in the background you can never tell what else it is doing. So just be careful as developers. All right. So moving on, SQL injection. Now SQL injection, it's a similar concept to what Yannick just pointed out with injecting JavaScript within a text field. In this case here, injecting an SQL query inside of a text field. All right. And I mean, there's a specific way to do it. It's easy to find out how. Or URL, right? It's easy to find out how. But what this one does now is based on how you wrote your code. So nowadays there are libraries or languages that are coming with a natural resilience against this. All right, so your ORM, which is short for Object Relation Module, or no, can't remember what I mean, mapper or mapping, something like that. Model, right? Model. Thank you. Right. So these days, your ORM module inside of your language will sanitize to some extent these SQL injections, right? But if you're doing like vanilla PHP, by vanilla I mean you're not using a framework or any ORM model, you're just doing straight PHP with a straight query. or you're doing ASP.NET old school, right? You're just like an open book towards this. So you have to do some manual work to sanitize your input to ensure that it's not a SQL query or anything malicious that might be coming in. So what they're doing here is they are typing in a SQL query with the hope that so they're doing some guesswork. So I guess this is almost like a brute force attack now. So they're going to assume that you're going to store all of your users in a table named users. So when they ask for first name when you ask for first name on your form, I would put in select star from users where name is something. All right. And then sometimes they will specify a where command that will have to be true. So like A equals A will be true. And then if A equals A, then everything in your database is going to come up. All right. So I mean there's a way to do it. All right. But essentially that is going to just furnish your entire database, your entire user database with the passwords. And if you did not encrypt the passwords, or if you didn't use a strong enough encryption, then they will have access to all of your user information and so on. So that's one of those techniques that people use to penetrate websites and get into the database to see what going on behind the scenes, right? So be wary and cognizant of that when you're developing your websites. Once again, modern day languages come with libraries to kind of mitigate against it, but just make sure you do your due diligence before anything else. All right. So, number one way to plug possible loopholes is to think about exploiting them yourself. All right. What can go wrong? So, if you have a man like Sheldon, or clearly a man like Yannick, right? Right. So you can if you're working with them, you just can give them the website and say, oh, break that. Right. So that's where you have white hat versus black hat hackers. And I mentioned that earlier. So your white hat hackers are generally security experts, security penetration personnel who would have been brought into a company to say, hey, make sure that I'm always secure. So they will always be trying to break down the walls, and whatever they can break down, they'll try to plug it before somebody who is malicious, dubbed a black hat hacker, before he tries it. All right. So that's the difference. And then sometimes, well, usually in the movies, I don't know if this has ever happened in real life or how often it happens in real life. But when a black hat hacker breaks down the Pentagon, which, as if, right? Then the Pentagon is now going to hire him or tell him that he has to come on staff, or else they'll expose him this or throw him in jail for that or blah, blah, blah. So I don't know if that happens, but that's the same principle. The black hat hacker was the malicious guy, and then they turn him into a white hat to say, okay, if you were able to break it down, you need to fix it, and you need to stay here and make sure that nobody else can break it down after this. All right, so you do have hackers out there, good and bad, and we know the most infamous hackers, Anonymous. Boy, the money not nothing to do. Once again. All right. So, firstly, we need to, well, panning for gold. That's the title here. So, essentially, that is just alluding to the fact that you're looking at all the possible exploits in your application or in an application, right? Sometimes HTML comments can give hints. So of course, by now we're all pros. We should know about the inspect element. So with inspect element or view page source in any modern browser, then we should be able to see the entire page and all the code that was used on it. All right. We can view the script code. We can see all of the resources being loaded. We can see the file path. So that's one thing you want to try and spoof as much as possible, which is why CDNs, content delivery networks, have become so popular, because with the CDN you're actually able to host your script files and certain asset files away from your server, so that you're not giving away the position relative to your files on the server, right? And also, well, I mean, there's also the performance aspect, that it's loading directly from the internet and not from your server. So it should load faster in theory, but there's also that security aspect to the using CDNs in your website, content delivery networks. So yeah, you want to look for any sensitive information in code that might be exposed. So like ASP, well, usually server-side code doesn't get rendered, but once again, you want to try your best not to overlook any of these things. You can watch for HTTP requests, responses and requests. So there's actually a network feature in the browser that allows you to monitor all network traffic across a site and actually break down all of the requests and pages and assets and even the post payload. I'm going to bring up an instance of Google Chrome so we can just look at it quickly. All right, so if I go to say facebook.com, all right, so if I right click and go to inspect, there is the network component, right? So if I refresh, I'm just going to refresh first, and then you'll see that it starts filling out all of the things that were loaded. I can click and then it will show me the headers that were sent. It was a request method of get and the response headers. All right. So this may not be so useful. I mean, it's just loading facebook.com, right? But then let us try to log in. So I'm going to say test@tester.com and password. All right. And then log in. And then we'll log in and then wait for it. All right. So we would see clearly it failed, because I mean, that's not any, I don't think anybody has any account at tester.com. But then we'll see here where they're showing us the login.php page, coming back with login attempt. So it has some, we know about get and post. So we know get will list the parameters in the browser and post will kind of hide the payload, right? So we should be able to appreciate that difference coming out of PHP coding. So if I click here, I should be able to pick up some amount of intel. Here we go. So down here it's actually showing me everything that was passed. All right. So then, I mean, I can actually, using this info, I can actually write up a post command. All right. So if I write a script to send a post command to login.php, it's got, yeah, see, it's the method is post. So it was posting to it. I was posting. So this was the form action.php, and the payload that was sent over comprised this. I'm sure it wasn't just this, but I'm just showing you that with a simple tool like Chrome, you can actually observe your network traffic and all of your requests. And suppose I do it and hack it for real. Well then, I guess I would be a legend. I'm no hacker though, so you don't have to worry about that. You don't have to worry about being complicit in any of this. Don't worry. Sure, it would be educational indeed. All right, so you can always use this tool to see what's going across. So even when developing your own application, if you have your post calls and something isn't working, this is an excellent debug tool. Outside of going for Fiddler or something else, you can just use Chrome and see what's going on. So actually, my friends and I, we wanted to build like a central banking application where we would basically broker requests to the different banking websites through one system. And we thought we could do it. And I mean, I'm pretty sure we can. Sorry, guys, some mosquitoes over here mad me. Yeah, sorry. I'm sure we thought we could do it. Because when you like log into Scotia, if you observe, if you just put on the network, I observe, you see that everything, your password, it shows you all the parameters that are needed for the post call. As to whether it uses like SOAP or REST, I really couldn't tell you. I couldn't tell you what protocol it's using, really. But I mean, this is Facebook. I'm pretty sure it's using REST. But you guys can play around with this and just look through if you wish. All right. So yeah, we wanted to build one of those, but it didn't bother because we figured that even then there would be some security concern trying to spoof calls to other banking agencies just to get information, right? But I think it would be a cool idea, but I know that no bank would get on board with that. So anyhow, let's get back to this. All right, so you can watch for HTTP requests and responses, the files, the parameters, blah, 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 and also the messages sent back. So typically in HTTP nomenclature, 200 is okay. 400 is invalid request. We all know the mighty 404. 500 is when the server mashup. Forbidden is when you don't have the required credentials to carry out something or go somewhere. And well, I guess invalid, which I said is 400, is really like, I don't know, if you try to go to somewhere that you, well, you can't. It's impossible. All right. So forms are the gateway into your server. All right. Forms are the gateway into your website / database. And if used correctly and on something that was secured poorly, can be the gateway into your server. All right. So if you do start attacking, Mr. Teresa, you did not get the instruction from me. Let's get that clear before you go and hack anybody website. All right. So, like I mentioned just now, you have your get and you have your post. So the get usually puts it in the URL. Get puts all of the information in the URL, and we know the post kind of hides it, but then it's still a packet header. It's still a packet, sorry. So if you sniff the packet, you can still look at the information, which is why HTTPS and post probably secure it more, because at least that post payload is encrypted and not easy to just hijack and decrypt. All right. So one way to try and reduce is to put on validation, but then you have to make sure that your validation actually is solid. So from this client side, you have two aspects. You have client and server side. From the client side, you have to ensure that you're checking values as they're entered, or as before it even hits the server, you're checking the validity as much as possible. So from the JavaScript side, you can probably check for, you use some regular expressions to check and make sure that no query looking text is being entered. that email address is valid, that the number is okay, stuff like that. And then you can still validate again before you put it in the database from the server side, just to ensure everything as much as possible is okay. But then, of course, a hacker can sometimes, using the whole inspect element, can actually modify the form while it's loaded. So like, even if you put in like max length and those things, they can probably just disable some of them. And here we go. Disable some of them, put in hidden input fields, and still try and submit the form, because at the end of the day, the form is going to be wired to try and go to an action. So if you have a max length restriction on your front end, it's best to have it on the back end also. Okay, if you restrict it to 50 and I'm going to do a SQL injection that's going to have 51 characters, so I disable it on the front end, but I still try to submit. If you have it enforced on the back end also, then you could still reject it and say, hey, this did not match. So it's good to do it at both sides, just to ensure. And I mean, even if not at both sides, at least the back end. So sanitize your input before you even try to put it into the database. All right. One other attack that people use is trying to guess the directories. And I mean, if I can guess your directory, then I can probably try and pull up. So firstly, you want to disable directory browsing. So I think when I showed you guys the WAMP server stuff, there was directory browsing. Sorry. Yeah, there was directory browsing enabled. So when I went to a site that there was no clear index page or no clear page defined for it to load directly, it just showed me all of the contents of the folder. Yeah, all the contents of the web folder. So you want to disable that for your site. You shouldn't. Nobody should go to your site and see all web contents. If anything, just put on an automatic reroute. That's, well, you disable it one, and you can enforce that disablement by putting on an automatic reroute to your home page at all times. All right. Okay. Yeah, I guess maybe. All right. So Sheldon is saying Google used to help by listing the paths to files if you ask nicely. And actually, let's go back over to Facebook. Well, I mean, to some extent, I don't know. I don't know if there's any less secure site I can look at. All right. I think this one is built with WordPress, so it probably will not. Oh, there you go. So you see from here, you can actually drill down into the folder structure. So this is one of the reasons that CDNs have become so lovely, because you see, like, all these things now, instead of exposing that they're in WP content slash uploads, and then when I hover, it's showing me the direct file path. You just put it in a CDN, so it's loading directly from some cloud-based service that is nowhere near your site, right? So from here, I can see every plugin that they have on the site, every theme, right? And all of the uploads, the images, etc., etc. Right? So you see that this tool is very, very powerful. The file system, okay, that doesn't do much right now. Right? This system can be very powerful. So it's a good tool to use to see your possible penetration points and plug them accordingly. All right. So other attacks. Shane wants to pick apart the VTDI website. Not nice. All right. So other attacks include attacking get parameters So you sit down and you just scrape everything that comes after that query, that query string object, well, that query string variable, rather. Attacking hidden, or the question mark, hidden input fields. So yeah, sometimes you have hidden input fields on your website. By changing those values, you can wreak some havoc at times. Attacking cookies. I'm not so versed on on doing this one at all. Injecting malicious scripting code and injecting malicious SQL code. All right, so these are some ways that we can go about attacking websites, and of course, if they can be attacked, then these are the pain points that we should pay attention to while developing them. All right, so less than a minute, going to kill this as usual and send the link, and then we just pick up from there, and then we can call it a night. All right, so stay tuned.